All right, thank you. I think we are ready to go. Welcome everybody joining us here in the room in Cali, Colombia at COP16, and for all of those who are joining from afar around the world to follow this debate today. My name is Les Brun. I am the Director of Climate and Food at the UN Foundation. I'm also a part-time farmer, which I think I need to mention here just to give a little bit of credibility to myself moderating this panel. I do 7 acres of agroecological farming. I just want to start by thanking everybody who's turned up today, of course thanking the organizers, and also thanking the CGIAR Pavilion for hosting us here today. Thank you so much. It's a great place. And we have a great event lined up for you now. We're going to have experts and practitioners who can help us to talk through some of the reality of shifting to and practicing regenerative agriculture. For those who are joining us online, we just finished watching an educational version of the movie Common Ground, which pleads the case for a shift to regenerative agriculture to save soil, but moreover also increase food security, mitigate climate change, and also address biodiversity loss. So that's the basis for the conversation we're going to have now. So I'll introduce the speakers and the panelists in a second. I want to talk you through their bios because there's so much to talk. But when they talk themselves, you're very welcome to talk a little bit about your backgrounds as well as the questions you're going to be getting. So we're going to have a conversation with this amazing panel, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A, and we will end by having John De La Parra give a closing statement before we head into a cocktail reception. Unfortunately, for those joining us online, you will not be able to join that, but if you can, feel free to have a drink at home while you're watching this session here. Okay, so without further ado, could I ask Monica, Karina, Louise, and Elena to join up here on the stage? Feel free to sit where you want to. Thank you. So to my immediate left, we have Elena Argoyo. She's the Policy Officer for World Rural Forum. Next to her is Luis Vincent de Facco, who's the Technical Secretary from Copra Farm. Next to him is Karina Gonçalves, who is the director of the Instituto Brasil Orgânico, but also representing here ANOFO today. And to my far left here is Monica Yates, who is the founder of Indigenous Women and Girls Initiative. So just basically to set the scene before we get into the questions and hear from my esteemed panelists here, I've mentioned this before at this COP. We find ourselves in a polycrisis, which has become kind of like a very overused word, but nonetheless, it is very important. We have more than 800 million people who are starving, living under hunger. We are on track to a 3.2 degree world, which is going to create so much havoc that even the worst dystopian movies can predict how bad it's going to be. And also very importantly for COP16 here is that we have seen a 73% loss of biodiversity since 1970. So we are in dire straits, and particularly from a biodiversity perspective, things are looking really, really bad. So what do we need to do? Well, we have here the multilateral conversation, the COP for the Montreal Kunming Agreement. We have the Paris Agreement. Also, for those who are following all 3 Rio Conventions, we also have the desertification convention. So we need to take these very important multilateral conversations and find a way to integrate them nationally. So we need to really make sure from a climate change perspective it gets integrated into the NDCs. Here with biodiversity, it's about the NBSAPs and so forth. But more importantly, we need to make sure that it goes from being policy to practice on the ground. And that's why we have these excellent speakers here with us today. So I'm going to ask some questions for the speakers. They're going to speak for about 4 minutes each. And then we're going to have some time for discussion. Then we're going to have a Q&A. And then in the end, we'll have John come up and give the closing statements. So without further ado, I would like to start with you, Monica. So we've heard about the shift in the narrative and the role of indigenous peoples, particularly within stakeholders who are supporting agroecology and regenerative agriculture. So we need to be on a path to convincing governments of the importance and the feasibility, as was just discussed in the movie, of bringing regenerative agriculture to scale. But we find ourselves still in the early stages of that. What do you see being the role of indigenous peoples' organizations in pushing governments towards embracing this shift within food production?
Thank you very much for having me. And I must tell you that the agroecology movement in Kenya started way back in 2019. And I thank many partners like Alliance for Food Sovereignty, Pelham Kenya, and other networks that have been pushing governments to even have a policy to scale up agroecology. Coming from a farmer community and also a pastoralist community, I grew up in a farm and I used to take care of livestock. So to me, this is something I had in mind and this is something I've grown with. In early 90s, we used to farm naturally. So agroecology, Region 10 is farming naturally. My mom never used any synthetic fertilizer. I saw that recently. We never even bought seed. We didn't have agrovets where to buy seeds. We used to regenerate our own seeds. We used to have small granaries. Every woman has to have that in every village. But currently we don't have those granaries. They're all gone. I don't know why. So again, we didn't even have these pesticides. So we used to soak the naturally herbs that we have in our farms. Neem tree, sodo maple, those herbs that are naturally in the forest. That is what we used to do, to use that. So again, when revolution came, when we started now, that was in, I saw that in the movie. And maybe that is the genesis of our pesticides in our community. So the movement has been doing on well. Currently, we have over 50 organizations advocating for agroecology transitioning. To me, that's a plus. And I remember when we had a meeting with African negotiators in Naivasha. And we had a serious conversation with our ministry, Kenyan ministry. Even the people who are directors in the agriculture, they were telling us, can you convince the president that organic agriculture will feed the nation? It's not about feeding the nation, it's about eating healthy. That is our argument. And if you look at the people who are practicing industrial agriculture, those are few people, the rich people who can own tractors, big tractors. The peasant farmer are the people who are doing the organic farming. And we see, and those peasant farmers are 80% of food producers. If you go to our markets now, who are bringing food to the market? They are women. And these women, they have small scale. They have small farms, 1 acre to 2 acres. So is that industrial farmers? So to me, the government is not protecting the peasant farmer. They're looking at quality, the number of production to export. And for us, we are looking at the farmer who is producing food, healthy food, taking care of the soil, and that farmer should be protected. So again, I want to thank everybody else, friends to agroecology, everybody that is speaking about regenerative agriculture. Thank you so much, because when we started the movement in 2019, we had minimal talks. I remember even when we were in Egypt, the food pavilion, there were a few of us talking about food, and now everybody else is talking about that. So again, that means that the movement is growing locally, nationally, regionally, and even internationally. We need to build up the momentum. We need to speak out and also support the peasant farmer who is producing food. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was great. And thank you so much for being a first mover and helping us other come in afterwards and really learn from what you've done so far. And you touched on many different things, but I wanted to highlight two things. One is the importance of talking about nutrition and not just calories, which is a mistake that is often made. We need to feed people healthily, not just empty calories. The other thing you really addressed is the food sovereignty aspect. As we are talking about producing food in sustainable ways, it's not just about what's good for the body and what is good for the planet, but also who owns the food production and where does the money flow. So thanks for bringing that up. Karina, bem-vindo. I wanted to come to you now. You have many hats, many roles. You're an agroecological farmer. You advocate for shifting the Brazilian, the global food systems towards regeneration. You've worked on as an agroecological mushroom farmer in Brazil for some time now and have a lot of experience of what that's like actually being a farmer. It would be great to hear a little bit about that and also your thoughts on how to bring that to scale. And it would be particularly interesting to hear a little bit about things from a Brazilian perspective, where there's a very big distinction between the commodity market and the agricultura familiar that's actually feeding people.
So, hello everyone. Thank you to be here. Thank you to open this space to us to share our work and to raise our voice. First of all, I will start with not good perspective from Brazil, and then we move to agroecology as a solution. So in Brazil, we are the largest consumer of pesticide in the world, the largest country that consume more pesticide in the world. If you put together the consumer of China and United States together, Brazil consumer more. If you think about United States consumer, Brazil consumer 3 times pesticide more than United States. And 70% of our greenhouse emission, different of other countries that come from industry and fossil fuels, 70% of our greenhouses emission is related to food system in Brazil. So if we look for the climate changes solution, if we look for the food system transformation in my country, I know it's more than Brazil, but looking for Brazil, we need to talk about food system. Otherwise, we are not talking about climate change. And one more number, in 2023 in Brazil, we approved 500 new pesticides in Brazil. So 500 new pesticides in Brazil. And in 2021, we consumed more than 720,000 tons of pesticide in 1 year. So this is the situation in our country. And every time I go to some places to talk about my work, people ask me how we can scale up agroforestry, how we can scale up agroecology. And what I like to say is, we need to think about scale up agriculture and this kind of agriculture like agroecology. But we have many people that want to practice agroecology, that want to grow food in agroecology way, that have no lands access. So first of all, we need to think about the land distribution. And then I'm sure in Brazil, we can find many people producing in different lands. So, okay, we can have one big land, scale up the production, but we can have too many farmers growing food in different small farms. So this is one thing that I want to point here. But we work with agroforestry and we work with agroecology in Brazil. And I always like to have my shiitake with me. So in our farm, we produce shiitake in agroforestry way. And we dry it too. So we bring it to the market fresh and we bring it to the market dry too. But agroecology, it's more than a way to produce food. Agroecology, it's a tool of food system transformation, because when we talk about agroecology, we talk about life. And it can be soil life, it can be water life, it can be our life, it can be biodiversity, it can be earth life in general. So if we want to look for food system transformation, we need to put in the center of the discussion agroecology. Otherwise, we can't do the transformation. And agroecology can do it very well, and we are here to prove we can be a lot of farmers doing that to feed people, to feed the soil, because at the same time we can feed people, we can feed the soil doing agroecology. And other point that I want to bring here, we need to delimit indigenous lands, because the indigenous people are doing, we are talking a lot about agroecology nowadays, but indigenous people are doing it, there are many times. So if we recognize their lands and we delimited their lands, we are doing the food system transformation too. It's not only about farming, because the indigenous people have a different way to farming. And we need to support the knowledge share too between farmers to farmers, because this is really important. Sometimes the people from university or technology technicians, they come to our farm to teach us. That's really good, because we need it. But it's really important to recognize that farmers have knowledge, and we like it. We like it to have knowledge share between farmers. So if we want to promote agroecology and agroforestry, we need to have this kind of knowledge share too. And we need to have the support to advocate in this high-level space as COP. So I'm really thankful to be here sharing with you, and I'm really thankful to be here advocating for my agroecology movement and representing young farmers, women farmers, and other partners that I'm representing here. So to finish, another point I want to bring here at this conversation is, many times when we talk about nature, even inside the agroecology movement, we talk like nature and us. But look, we are nature. We are part of nature. So we need to work without nature. And nature can teach us, as we saw here at the movie, how to do agriculture. Because there is no one better than nature that know how to grow foods, to grow everything, and at the same time to take care about the planet. So if you want to do the right way, we don't go to the opposite way as Green Revolution did. So we go to the same way that nature go, and we can arrive at the right place, and we can feed people, and we're gonna have more than we need in food in our table. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karina. Excellent points as always. And I think the aspect of working with nature as against trying to fight nature is like a classic aspect that is so important to address. You're also talking about the aspect of production versus distribution, whether or not we have a production problem in the world or we have a distribution, particularly equitable distribution of food resources. And I think that's a great segue to come to you, Louise. You're many things as well. You're technical secretary for COPROFAM. You're also an economist. So it would be interesting to hear a little bit about from you, like moving beyond the aspects of health and nature benefits of agroecology and regenerative agriculture, talking about the aspects of the socio-economic benefits. Because often we hear governments see there's like financial constraints as a key reason for not putting in place incentives that would shift towards regenerative agriculture. Could you mention a little bit about the economic case for food systems change?
Buenas tardes a todos, a todos. Gracias, Brown, por esta pregunta. ¿Aló? 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 Ahora sí. Bueno, buenas tardes a todas y a todas que están aquí presentes. Gracias por la pregunta, Brown. Antes yo quería hacer un depoimento, un sentimiento mío como hijo de agricultor familiar. Esta película que nos vimos acá, a mí me tocó profundamente, porque ahí vuelvo a mi nona, la pelea que tenía con su hijo, que es mi tío y mi madre, con el tema de ingresar con el paquete de la Revolución Verde. Lo agroquímico, la semilla comprada, porque esperaba que así iba a generar ganos, mayor productividad, mayores ingresos. Y cuando veo la finca ahora de mi tío, con meus primos y sobrinos que estaban trabajando allá, sobró casi nada. Casi nada. Entonces, para mí me toca profundamente esta película porque la Revolución Verde, empezada por los países del norte y vendida al mundo todo, incluso a Brasil, ha hecho un daño terrible. Ha hecho un daño terrible. Eso está reflejado en esta película. Y hoy no hay otra salida. No hay otra salida sino cambiar lo que estamos haciendo hoy mal y empezar a recuperar. Recuperar todo lo que nosotros destruimos. Recuperar, generar, reflorestar y hacer una agricultura sostenible, agrobiodiversa, donde los recursos naturales son claves para hacer este cambio. Entonces, para nosotros, el tema de escalar este cambio, no hay otra salida sino políticas públicas serias para que se pueda poner en marcha un otro cambio. Este cambio que nosotros queremos, que es la propuesta acá de la agricultura generativa, una agricultura agrobiodiversa, una agricultura sostenible, donde que nosotros podemos tener florestas, bosques, aguas, ríos saludables y alimentos sanos para todos nosotros días, comer, porque esto es vida, es salud. Y la agricultura generativa propone eso. Y para mí, nosotros como Coprofam tenemos la estrategia, la agroecología. Tenemos como estrategia a la agroecología como medio hoy de adaptarnos, de nos crearmos resiliencia, de nos mitigarmos el efecto del cambio climático y sobrevivir. Y pienso que la agricultura familiar campesina tiene un rol clave en este proceso. No será la gran granja, no será lo gran terrateniente, no será el agronegocio que va a cambiar, que va a hacer este cambio que nosotros queremos. O sea, de emitir menos gases de efecto invernadero y fixar más carbono al suelo. O sea, esta agricultura de menor impacto, más saludable, solamente es posible con la agricultura familiar campesina. Y por esa razón estamos acá, porque creemos que tenemos potencial y podemos hacer eso. Bien, la pregunta es que dice el Brown es importante y vamos a ver si nosotros logramos contestarla acá de manera conjunta. Los gobiernos siempre nos dicen que no hay presupuesto para la agroecología. No hay presupuesto para la agricultura familiar campesina, pero hay presupuesto para pagar la deuda de los bancos, hay presupuesto siempre para pagar, entiende, la deuda pública con el sector privado. Hay siempre recursos, presupuesto para la grande agricultura, pero no hay para la agroecología, no hay para lo pequeño. Entonces yo pienso que tenemos también alguna deficiencia y que en cuanto a nuestras organizaciones estamos buscando siempre crear el enlace para nos juntarmos, tenemos más fuerza para llegar al gobierno quizás no solamente para un reclamo, sino con una propuesta más sólida, más consistente, con argumentos, con datos técnicos, con métricas que podemos discutir con el gobierno y contraargumentar que sus argumentos no es más aceptable. Yo no acepto ningún argumento de un gobierno que no hay plata para invertir en la agricultura. O que no hay decisión política, no hay voluntad política de hacerla. Por el otro lado, nós temos que tener el argumento que la medida que nosotros hicimos una agricultura sana, una medida que estamos recuperando el suelo, que vamos ganando la fertilidad, que va a aumentar la productividad del agricultor, que va a mejorar los ingresos, que va a tener una comida sana, y la comida sana va a generar menos enfermedad, menos doença, que va a presionar los gastos públicos con salud, hospitalización y así por delante. Cuando nosotros vamos poniendo arriba de la mesa del gobierno varios argumentos de que la agricultura generativa, la agricultura sana, la agroecología, o sea, la agricultura biodinámica, sintrópica, ¿qué no podemos decir? Toda esta agricultura agrobiodiversa puede generar cosas buenas. Na medida que estamos recuperando el agua, na medida que estamos recuperando el bosque, todo eso va creando un otro ambiente. Un ambiente que es más saludable para todos. Y una comunidad, un territorio, una municipalidad, un estado, una nación que tiene una agricultura saludable, cambia todo. Los modos de vida, la salud, la comida, en todo. Y eso contribuye para la economía. O que nosotros no tenemos hoy, Brown, ojalá que y estamos buscando parcería que nos ayude a la agricultura familiar a hacer estudios técnicos científicos para nosotros poner algunas métricas arriba de la mesa y la discusión, no solamente con los gobiernos a nivel nacional, pero también en esos espacios de las COP, sea la COP de la biodiversidad, sea la COP del clima, porque nosotros tenemos que poner algunas métricas para provar para el gobierno, provar incluso para las Naciones Unidas, de que la agricultura familiar produce alimentos con menor impacto ambiental y tiene un potencial de hacer mucho más frente a la situación y la emergencia climática que estamos viviendo. Y nosotros estamos de pleno acuerdo con la agricultura generativa. Para nosotros es un elemento nuevo en términos de narrativa, pero la práctica es antigua. Y tenemos que volver a hacer lo que nuestros ancestrales hacían, ¿no? Y ese es el camino, no hay otro camino, Brown. Tenemos que hacer eso. Y estamos bastante solidarios con esta iniciativa de ustedes. Queremos nos sumar y ojalá que usted también nos ayude para que esto también pueda ser difundido y para que nuestras organizaciones cada vez tomen más conciencia, tomen más protagonismo, iniciativa de discutir en su territorio, con sus comunidades, con sus gobiernos, con la academia, para que nosotros podamos en marcha un cambio. Este cambio tiene que empezar a crear un entorno que motive a todos nosotros, no solamente los agricultores, sino toda la sociedad y nuestros territorios, para que realmente logramos hacer la presión nacional necesaria arriba de los gobiernos para que priorice esta iniciativa, priorice esta agenda, priorice esta agricultura, porque si no, vamos a seguir destruyendo y la situación va a se complicar, ¿no? Y va a nos afectar a todos.
Thank you so much. So many rich points in there, and thanks for pointing out the synergistic aspects of things and also making clear there is only one way. It's not a matter if we want to do it, it's like when we do it, and the sooner we do it, the better. And you also touched on the aspects of funding and repurposing funding into regenerative agriculture, and agroecology is so important, and it's one of the biggest hurdles we're going to be facing taking this forward. Okay, Elena, I wanted to come to you. We have about 4 minutes before we have to move on to the next one. So it's a good segue from what we just heard now, because you work a lot with farmers and you follow the ups and downs of them trying to work on a regenerative agriculture basis and bring things into market integration. Shifting towards and scaling up regenerative agriculture has a lot of challenges. Could you talk to some of these challenges and also maybe address the role of the key stakeholders such as policymakers, corporations, financial institutions?
Thank you very much. Challenging, a 2-per-1 question for 5 minutes. So. But luckily, some of the points have been already addressed in the panel. So just for the ones that know us, the World Rural Forum is a global network of family farmers organizations working all over the world. So part of our membership are for example, in OFO, CoProFarming at regional level. We have also in Africa some of the most relevant organizations, Asia, Pacific, and so on. So I'm trying to bring a bit of recap of what they have already agreed on the main points that they consider that are the main challenges, and also the proposals, no? I will say that, and it's something that has been already said here, one of the key challenges are land tenure, for example. When you don't know if the tenure will be yours in the future, maybe you are not keen to invest more or try to change the practices there. So that's one of the biggest challenges. Second, I would say that the capacity building, but also the knowledge exchange between farmers on how to do things. And we have seen in the film that the first point is knowing how to do things. No, you know that there are some problems in your farm, but you don't really know how to address those challenges. So that's the second thing, and it's very relevant, interesting that nobody's arriving from top down to tell you how to do things, and I have liked the way in the film you can see that farmer to farmer is sometimes more relevant than some others coming from top down, not to tell us how to do things. And third, and extremely relevant, the support that is needed. We have to continue working for agroecology and sustainable practices, but we have to understand, and in the case of family farmers, the scale is very relevant. When you are small, maybe you don't have the resources, not the knowledge, resources, but also the financial backup to change your way of doing it. So those are the most relevant elements that I would like to bring here, that have been already mentioned, obviously. And on the other hand, on the role of the key stakeholders, first of all, policymakers are key. First, because they can support the kind of policies they are developing. For example, repurposing some funds to non-harmful activities, and it's something that has been discussed here in the negotiations, so we have to keep an eye on that. Secondly, ensuring that family farmers organizations are included in the decision-making processes at international level, but also when we are talking about MBSAPs, NDCs, NAPs, we have already identified as family farmers organizations all over the world that they are not taken into consideration. They are on delay, the countries, but there we have an opportunity also to tell them, okay, here we are to support you, to understand and to share with you the knowledge that is already on the ground. So that's one point on how we ensure that they can be part of the processes. And with the representative organizations, we have representative organizations, so that's the way of doing it, because they have representation all over the world and they have the trust of the members also. And secondly, and obviously the financial institutions have something to do, the public ones, but also the private institutions, because family farmers organizations need the resources directly. They have been developing a public policy, supporting public policies on family farming specifically, and now they are trying to support also on all these topics. They are cooperatives in some cases, they are trust partners to share and to manage the resources to arrive directly to the grassroots. So that's a very relevant actor. And on the third one that we normally don't talk about, because we always come to the policymakers, funders, the consumers, is a very relevant actor, because they can, in a way, drive the demands on how to change and how to ask for other kind of products of way of doing. And for example, we were discussing in another panel the labeling and certification processes. In some cases, they are not accessible for family farmers and small scale farmers, but there are other opportunities of doing them in another way with participatory process that maybe Faco can also share with us then if we have time. But there are other kind of processes, so we can ensure that family farmers produce in another way and consumers understand that, and we generate a common, how do you say, movement together. So I would say, I hope that I have done everything in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
You did very well. Thank you so much. And thanks for bringing up the aspect of consumers, because we need to talk about the whole custody chain to be able to talk about food systems change. So we need to listen to and learn from the farmers. We need to enable much better farmer-to-farmer communication, and we need to fund farmers to do the right thing. That sounds like a just transition to me. And to hear much more about how that could be done, maybe I would like to give the floor now to John, which I'll introduce in a second. Please keep your seats. I think we can just have it a little nice round table. So we're going to hear now from John De La Parra, who is the director of the food initiatives at the Rockefeller Foundation. Over to you, John.
Thanks so much. Should I just, I don't want to stand in front of you. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. I'm so glad you all stayed late tonight to see this film. What could I possibly add to this amazing panel? I mean, these are the frontline folks doing the actual work. And I'll say I grew up on a small goat farm in Alabama, so I'm also, and I raise chickens and have a regenerative farm of my own, so I do have the connection to the land as well. But one thing that I think is so important, and I've been trying to say that in every platform that I have here, is that we hear a lot about protecting nature and prioritizing nature and biodiversity here and many times, but we don't often talk about the stewards of nature and biodiversity, and here are the stewards of nature and biodiversity, and I think that this is another platform to raise those voices. The other thing that occurs to me is that part of the reason we're in the mess we're in is because we have relied on a capitalist colonialist structure and mindset, and how can we possibly rely on those same mindsets to now get us out of this situation? It doesn't make any sense. So we have to rely on frontline communities, indigenous people, the people that are actually doing the work in the field, and trust that they can guide us better than the powers that have put us in the situation that we're in now. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about how the foundation has been viewing this to empower voices in the field and frontline communities. The first one is around, and I'll be brief, but the first one is around metrics, which was mentioned at the very beginning of this, and some of this is with the Regen 10 project. As was mentioned, we don't have standardized metrics for regenerative agriculture, and in fact, even the term regenerative agriculture is controversial. We heard agroecology, there's traditional ecological knowledge, and there are many other terms, and even those have their own discrepancies and little fights that happen around how you define them. And then when we think about how we're actually going to measure that, as was mentioned, an outcomes-based framework seems to make the most sense, because agriculture is so specific to a geography and a crop that it becomes very difficult to talk about specific practices, although we can generalize. As you saw in the film, there are some general principles we can think about. And also, as we're thinking about this, there's a group called A Growing Culture. Maybe some of you know A Growing Culture, AGC, an amazing grassroots organization that supports a lot of this type of work. And they have conceptualized regenerative agriculture on a spectrum. And we have adopted this view of how regenerative agriculture could be conceptualized. And that's from shallow to deep. On the shallow end, you often see soil health being prioritized only, and we see many corporate commitments that say that they're regenerative, and again, there aren't good metrics, so how do we know what that actually means? It often is something around soil health, which is good, right? And this film talks a lot about soil health. But as we move further toward the deep end, we will think about biodiversity, many things we're interested while we're here, water health, And then as we get to the deepest end, only then do we start talking about people and community and equity, even spirituality, the things that are intimately linked to agriculture. And we think that we need to push towards that deep end, even though we don't think that the big landholders, the big corporations necessarily are going there. I think it's imperative that we push to the deepest end, because to be truly regenerative, you have to include those things. And I might even go further to think about what are the foods that we're making with this agriculture. So if we're using regeneratively grown food to create, to make foods that are unhealthy for people, that are causing diabetes, we can't have highly processed foods that are produced regeneratively that are then killing people. It's counterintuitive if we're using the term regenerative. And so as we're getting to this deeper end and really centering community, that's where our work centering the voices of indigenous frontline communities come, and I think it is important. It's part of why IUCN is part of Regen 10. And then some of the other levers that we see around nutrition, you heard some things about that. And so we're investing in projects to show kind of the definitive science that will show that regeneratively produced food is healthier for people as compared to standardized food produced through standardized agriculture. And then finally, we're developing now a new strategy around school meals. So how does that link? So one question we had too is around demand. So, we think about consumers have a demand, and perhaps it's a high-end consumer who will pay more for regenerative agriculture. But actually, a large majority of the food that is dispersed around the world is purchased through institutional procurement, and particularly through school feeding programs. So what if we could incentivize governments to purchase food that is produced regeneratively to feed children? It solves kind of two issues. Of course, there's a lot of work that would have to go into that, but there are many countries who are already on a path that would make it a little bit softer for this to be an example in a couple of different places. So we're looking at that as one strategy around the world, institutional procurement, but particularly school feeding as a route to drive demand for regenerative agriculture. So I'll pause there. I know we're over time, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. So now I want to give the floor to somebody who's actually making everything happen, who's working with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, also known as IFAD. Mario Divin is going to talk to us about the work they do. And IFAD is the organization in the world that actually works with smallholder farmers all across the different continents, very different contexts, and fund them to do the right thing. So without further ado, over to you, Marie.
Thank you very much. So the same, I don't know whether I'll add a lot, but this morning we had as you said, IFAD mandate is rural poverty and rural poor. And this morning we had this 2-hour exciting discussion with a lot of you, mainly farmers, indigenous people, and youth. And for me, I think that's one of the main messages, how we can listen more to the farmers and empower and disseminate your voice. And, because the way, at least a lot of you, and how we do that. And in IFAD, some of the way we do that is also with direct access to finance. We have different finance. We have the FAFO that some of you are members of, which is a farmers forum. Our farmers talk to our board directly, Same thing for indigenous people and for youth. And I think we just completed the evaluation of the FAFO, and I think we need to disseminate more also this result to showcase the evidence that farmers, regional, national, when they have the finance, they can drive the change and do it till the grassroots. I think you were saying that this morning. I think that's one of the strengths of working with farmers. It's not easy as big international finance institutions to how you get all the way to the last mile, to the remote area and so on. So I think we need to showcase a bit more these results and work together to continue partnering more and more with farmers on the ground. Some of the key elements also I liked on this panel is a topic about life, as you mentioned. I think that was really rich, that we talk about soil health, but that's just the start. It's bringing people's life. It's about nutrition. It's about health. It's about creating habitat for different types of other animals and food, and I think we need to bring it up. And as was mentioned, I also like the consumer and the nutrition. I think when we talk about the controversial feed the world thing, one thing is about showing the evidence that regenerative agroecology can produce, But it's also about having a whole of system approach. I mean, it cannot feed, 70% waste if the world continues to waste food and eat very bad food. I mean, that wouldn't work. No, we need to still work on an ecosystem, and things go together, and we need to educate the youth and the children, or they need to educate us to make the change. I think that's another meeting we'll have tomorrow, but I think this is really also how we can make the change. It goes hand in hand. It's not only that. And the second one, I liked all the point on knowledge. I think it's about the ecosystem to make the change. And sometimes when we design our project, that's sometimes things which are not easy to make. It's not only about, doing some few things. It's about investing in knowledge, in capacity development, in the soft, in the extension system. It's actually, apart from being a senior biodiversity specialist, I'm an agroeconomist, and I worked a lot on extension system first, and farmer to farmer, and building the trust, and how we invest in that. And it's not always easy, as financing institutions and loans, to devote funding, to build the ecosystem. It's not only about the big thing, but to be able to transit. I mean, you need to have the knowledge, but you also need to build the ecosystem of services locally, the access to the different local seeds that you need. I mean, I was working with smallholder farmers in northern Ghana, and we were trying to transit 20 years ago to a bit of regenerative practices and cover crops. But, you need to get the access to the seeds of the cover crop. I mean, maybe these big farmers in US, they can manage that. But if you're talking about your smallholder farmers, you need to build a new ecosystems of bio-inputs, seeds, system, exchange, and knowledge. So how you bring that up, and you get also the access to finance in this mean. So I think, yes, as you said, going forward, that's what I like this COP. No? Now farmers discover it more and more, and that you see that this COP is one of the most people-centered, I think, nature and people. So the NBSAPs and the GBF says whole of society and whole of government approach. So I think we need to make sure this is happening on the ground, because we know it's not yet enough happening, but I think we have the opportunity with this GBF and the NBSAPs to bring a lot of these topics on the ground, because we have a target on sustainable consumptions. We have the agroecology targets. We have the reductions of pesticides. So I think now one of the things is to make it happen is to bring it at country level, no? In this policy dialogue, and try to build, the gap, and so that we can get more finance to the right thing. So yeah, thank you very much. And congratulations on this moving report.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your great suggestions for how to take things forward. And this kind of wraps up this event. So thank you so much, Pascal, for opening this event earlier today. And thank you so much to Monica, Karina, Louise, Elena, John, and Marie for your excellent input and contributions here today. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much to the people in the room. Thank you. And thank you so much to everybody who's following it from home tonight. And please stick around for those, not for those at home, you can turn off now, but for everybody who's in the room now, please stay around. There's going to be a cocktail reception and plenty of opportunity to talk to all the panelists and have a great conversation. Thank you.
Hello, just to let you know that we are going to organize another similar event. So again, the projection of the movie, and followed up by a panel discussion, but with different panelists. So it will be different from today, and it will be on the 29th. Maybe you can change the slide, if possible. We will leave it there, so you will have all the information about the event on the 29th.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Stapleton from CGIAR, and I just wanted, listening to the really interesting conversation. We have an event in 2 days in the Netherlands Pavilion, which will be about how to use trade as a tool of sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture. So we're bringing together a lot of different groups, from local to global to international, and we're really trying to concentrate on how we can create messages for the science to policy interfaces. How can we make them perform better for us? So it would be really good if you could come along. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.